The first tremor came as nothing more than a faint shiver through the hull, a vibration so delicate that most aboard the vessel dismissed it as a quirk of the ice shifting far above them. But Lieutenant Mara Hale felt it immediately, a low, resonant hum that travelled through the metal like a whisper pressed directly against bone. She stood at the viewing port, watching the cathedral-like ceiling of ancient Antarctic ice drift overhead, its blue shadows layered in impossible depths. The submarine's instruments insisted nothing was wrong, yet the sensation did not fade. It deepened, it thickened, it became intention. The crew had been navigating a narrow trench beneath the Ross ice shelf, charting an unmapped cavity revealed only months earlier by satellite anomalies. Scientists believed it might hold preserved geological secrets or unfamiliar microbial ecosystems. No one considered the possibility that something larger might inhabit the darkness, something older, something awake. As the submarine advanced, the walls of the under-ice canyons seemed to constrict, as though the frozen world were reconsidering their permission to pass. Sonar returned distorted readings. Shapes bloomed and vanished. Even the captain, a veteran of polar explorations, began tightening his jaw between orders. Outside the vessel, particles suspended in the black water moved with unnatural cohesion, drifting not with the currents, but with the submarine itself, as if drawn to the disturbance of its passage. The second tremor struck harder. The lights flickered. A breath of fear moved silently through the cabin. Mara leaned closer to the reinforced glass. A faint glow pulsed somewhere ahead, something warm-colored and soft, like the heartbeat of a creature slumbering in the deep. But it was impossible. Nothing warm should exist here. Nothing alive of that scale. She tried to steady herself, inhaling the cold, recycled air, yet a deeper instinct whispered that their instruments were not lying. They were simply outmatched. The submarine edged forward until the glow expanded, revealing patterns etched into the ice shelf above, long, symmetrical ridges that undulated like the ribs of an unseen colossus. At first, the crew believed they were geological formations, the frozen remains of pressure and time. But then the ridges shifted, not subtly, not slowly. They moved with deliberate, unified force, bending in a way no natural ice structure could bend, folding like the chambers of a sleeping lung responding to the presence of heat. The glow brightened. The submarine groaned as if gripped by an invisible tide. Mara's pulse hammered. She felt the impossible truth forming, heavy and ancient. The ice above them was not simply ice. It was a shell, a membrane, a structure alive in ways human science had no language for, a structure reacting to them. And while she watched it unfurl, she felt the eerie sensation of being watched back. In that suffocating darkness, with the weight of aeons pressing down from above, a sudden thought came to her, one that felt foreign, implanted, as though rising not from her mind, but from the thing beyond the glass. If something hidden for millennia is capable of movement, what else might it be capable of? A low creaking echoed through the hull. Metal strained against pressure not recorded on any gauge. The captain demanded a status update, but the engineer's voice faltered as he scanned numbers that made no physical sense. The structure above them was altering the water around it, changing density, changing flow, drawing them deeper. Mara's breath clouded in the cold air. Her fingers brushed the window as though she could touch the luminous rhythms outside. And right then, as the glow rippled in what looked disturbingly like recognition, she felt compelled to ground herself in something human, something real. Tell me, from where are you watching this? The world is vast, and yet here we stand together at the edge of something older and darker than any map dares mark. The submarine lurched downward as the living architecture shifted again, an immense pulse that sent silvery fractures shimmering across the ice. Not breaking, not collapsing, simply opening, as though clearing a path into the heart of its hidden body. The crew scrambled. Alarms rang in fractured bursts, and yet the vessel continued forward in a smooth, deliberate descent, guided by a force they could neither fight nor comprehend. Mara tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat as the glow intensified, illuminating the interior of the cavern. The patterns were no longer ambiguous. They resembled vascular networks, glowing channels circulating something luminous and slow. The ice walls curved into shapes too symmetrical to be accidental, too deliberate to dismiss as natural formations. Every surface radiated the soft pulse of a titanic, slumbering consciousness, responding to their proximity. Another internal whisper brushed her mind. Not words, not language, simply the unmistakable sensation of attention. Heavy, curious, ancient. The submarine's lights flickered again, dimmed, then steadied. Silence fell so utterly that even the engines seemed to hold their breath. Mara knew then that whatever surrounded them was not merely responding. It was listening. A subtle pressure filled the cabin, like a shift in gravity without motion, as though the world outside had leaned closer to the metal skin of the sub. The engineer murmured that they should ascend immediately, but the captain's order died unfinished when an immense shadow moved beneath the vessel. Slow, fluid, unmistakably alive. A chill seeped into Mara's bones despite the climate controls. She felt suspended in a moment, stretched thin, as though time itself hesitated to continue. The shadow circled once, vast enough that the sonar failed to return a coherent outline. A structure above them, a presence below them, a living corridor closing around them like the throat of some colossal being awakened from hibernation. This, she realized, was not a cavern. It was an organism, a structure beneath the ice so massive that its anatomy shaped the landscape, so ancient that entire eras had passed overhead without disturbing its rest. And now, disturbed by the vibrations of their passage, it shifted, not in aggression, but simply in acknowledgement, like a sleeper roused by the faint touch of sunlight. Mara pressed her palms to the glass, barely breathing as the walls brightened further, their glow synchronizing with the shadow's movement. The entire space pulsed as one. A single organism, a single living architecture, a single ancient mind awakening from beneath miles of ice. The captain tried once more to reverse thrust. The submarine did not move. The glow outside softened into a shimmering, hypnotic rhythm. A pattern that felt like a call, a beckoning into depths untouched by human imagination. Mara felt her heartbeat align with it, drawn into its slow cosmic cadence. Something beyond human comprehension had noticed their intrusion, and instead of rejecting them, it pulled them gently but irresistibly deeper. And as the vessel drifted forward, surrendered to the living current, a cold whisper curled inside Mara's thoughts, a warning or an invitation. She could not tell which. The shadows expanded, the glow intensified, the organism shifted again, and the entire under-ice world breathed. If you are still here, held by the same darkness that encloses them, follow this journey deeper, and before the abyss widens any further, allow your presence to anchor ours. Subscribe to remain part of this descent, for what awakens beneath the ice has only begun to stir. The descent did not happen all at once. It unfolded in a slow gravitational surrender, as though the submarine had been caught in the breathing cycle of something vast and patient. The hull no longer groaned in protest. Instead, it emitted a low, continuous hum, like a tuning fork pressed against the pulse of the world. Mara sensed that the creature, if creature was even the right word, had no intention of crushing them or consuming them. Its interest was older, steadier, as though it were studying a rare disturbance drifting into a chamber that had not known movement in thousands of years. The cavern around them widened into a colossal void. The glowing vascular patterns stretched out in every direction, curving upward into a dome that seemed to shift subtly with each pulse of light. What Mara first mistook for ice formations began revealing intricate order. Spiraling segments interlocked like the plates of some titanic shell, each one layered with translucent membranes that shimmered when the submarine's lights passed over them. Threads of warmth radiated through those membranes in branching paths, creating a mosaic that resembled both anatomy and architecture. Silence dominated the cabin, broken only by occasional shallow breaths. Charts became useless. Depth gauges spun without calibration. Sonar returned only a smooth, undulating surface, as if the entire space around them was absorbing sound rather than reflecting it. Mara watched the readings flatten into nothing, leaving them effectively blind except for what their eyes could decipher. The captain whispered an order to run a full diagnostic, though it felt more like a plea than a command. The crew obeyed out of habit, though they all understood the futility. Their technology had not been designed for this. No human instruments had ever anticipated encountering a structure whose scale defied measurement, whose presence distorted the physical environment simply by existing. The submarine, built for the crushing pressures of the deep ocean, felt suddenly fragile, as though made of thin glass, drifting into the interior of an ancient being whose patience might expire at any moment. Outside, the glow dimmed to a deeper amber, shifting rhythmically like the slow turn of a lantern in the dark. Mara sensed intention in that pulse, not language, not emotion, but attention. As if the organism were adjusting itself around them, adapting, perhaps even communicating in the only way it knew how. Each fluctuation of light traveled down the living walls, like a signal coursing through nerves. She found herself leaning so close to the glass that her forehead nearly touched it. Her breath fogged the surface, and she wiped it away with trembling fingers. The glow responded, brightening for a brief moment before settling back into its steady rhythm. It felt like acknowledgement, as if the organism saw her individually, separate from the others, and was deliberately aligning its focus with her presence. A distant motion stirred in the depths below. The submarine dipped slightly as currents shifted, and the shadow that had circled them earlier reappeared, less a shape now and more a distortion, as though the water itself thickened around an invisible mass. Its movement was slow, but not aimless. It traced wide arcs beneath the submarine, the same way an animal might circle a foreign object washed into its territory. Each pass sent a soft vibration through the vessel, a deep resonant thud that did not feel hostile, only impossibly large. The engineer muttered that something in the electromagnetic field was fluctuating. He pointed at the monitor, where waves of interference rippled in patterns that looked almost organic themselves. The readings pulsed in synchronization with the glow outside. Mara felt a chill wrap around her spine. Not fear, exactly, but the uneasy awe of realizing they were in contact with a form of life that communicated not through sound or movement, but through shifts in energy itself. Without warning, the glow surged. The cavern brightened in a sweeping rush, revealing details previously lost to the shadows. Massive tendrils of translucent tissue extended overhead, fusing with the ice shelf above in twisting roots that climbed like frozen lightning. The surface of each tendril contained countless tiny cells, flickering with light, like stars shimmering beneath a frozen sea. They stretched farther than the submarine's beams could reach, upwards into the ancient ice that had entombed them for millennia. Mara felt her breath freeze in her chest. The implications crushed her with terrifying clarity. This organism had not been trapped beneath the ice by accident. It had integrated with it. The ice shelf was not merely its habitat, it was part of its body, a living symbiosis spanning miles. The crew stared in silent disbelief. The only sound was the soft mechanical whir of the submarine systems struggling to compensate for environmental changes, then stabilizing as though the organism itself were somehow regulating the conditions around them. The temperature inside the cabin dropped gradually. Frost ghosted across the edges of the viewing port. The environment was shifting deliberately, adapting in real time to their presence. Mara touched the glass again. For a moment she felt warmth, soft, pulsing, as though the organism exhaled against the hull. A quiet whisper brushed her thoughts. No words, no directive, just a sensation like being gently guided. The submarine drifted forward without engine thrust, suspended in the gentle pull of a current that seemed to materialize around them. A corridor opened ahead. It was not a tunnel carved by water or the slow churning of ice. It was a living passageway, its walls formed by layers of overlapping membranes that retracted in a slow, deliberate movement. Light radiated from within them in soft pulses, illuminating the path with a biological glow that shimmered like candlelight seen through deep water. The crew hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this choice was not theirs to make, that they were being invited, guided, perhaps even tested. But they had no means of resisting. Their engines responded sluggishly, as though dampened by forces they could not counter. The current pulled them gently toward the corridor, and like a leaf drifting along a tide, they followed. Inside the passage, the glow deepened into rich bronze and molten gold. Patterns traced along the walls, shifting in ways that defied physics, as though each layer of membrane contained a different internal structure, revealed only by the passing of light. It was beautiful, hauntingly so, and yet undeniably unsettling, the kind of beauty that felt unmeant for human eyes. A vibration travelled through the corridor, not a tremor, but a resonant sound wave so deep it vibrated through bone rather than air. The walls shimmered in response. Mara sensed it again. That feeling of attention, no longer distant, but focused sharply upon them. The submarine slowed as the corridor widened into a chamber so vast that the edges dissolved into darkness. She felt it before she saw it. A presence. Not the shadow below. Not the membranes around them. Something central. Something old. Something aware. The chamber brightened gradually, revealing the faint outline of an immense core pulsing at the far end. A structure that resembled a heart, but far more complex, with branching conduits spiraling outward like the roots of a planetary network. Each pulse radiated shockwaves of light through the chamber, illuminating the water in shimmering waves. The organism was fully awake now, and they had reached its center. A soft whisper pressed against Mara's thoughts, deeper this time, closer, as though the ancient intelligence had finally decided to speak across the gulf between their worlds. The submarine drifted closer, unable to turn away. If you have followed them this far, do not drift from the darkness now. Let this descent draw you deeper. And if this journey has taken hold of you, subscribe to remain with us as the truth beneath the ice begins to bear its full, unimaginable shape. The core chamber expanded around them, like the interior of a colossal cathedral carved from living light. The glow pulsed in long, thunderous waves that rippled through the water, each surge radiating from the central mass with the slow certainty of a heartbeat older than continents. Mara felt the vibration travel through her ribs, her spine, her teeth. It was not painful. It was simply inescapable, as though her body had become part of the environment, resonating with the same frequency that governed this ancient organism. The submarine drifted forward until the engines cut completely, overwhelmed by the pressure gradients shifting in precise, deliberate patterns. The controls responded sluggishly, then not at all. They were no longer navigating. They were being positioned, placed, aligned within the chamber like a foreign object, set before an entity attempting to understand it. The glow across the walls intensified. The branching conduits that resembled veins expanded, contracting slowly as fluid, or something like fluid, pulsed through them. The scale of it was incomprehensible. The chamber stretched so far that the furthest edges dissolved into haze, and yet every surface reacted to the submarine's presence. Patterns formed, spiraled, expanded, and rearranged, as though countless sensory systems were sampling and resampling their existence. Mara felt something brush the edge of her mind. Not a thought, not language, but awareness. It was subtle at first, like a shift in atmosphere, a faint static that tingled along her scalp. She gripped the back of her chair, her breath caught. The presence was not simply watching them. It was reaching, not physically, but through whatever ancient sensory network allowed it to interact with the world around it. The organism was attempting to understand what these small intruders were, why they had come, and whether their presence meant threat or opportunity. The captain spoke softly, barely more than a whisper, as though raising his voice might trigger a reaction they could not predict. "Is it communicating?" Mara didn't answer. She didn't know. She only knew that something inside the chamber was shifting again. Not the membranes, not the conduits, but the core itself. The pulsing mass at the center brightened, revealing layered structures within it, each rotating at different rhythms, like concentric orbits of luminescent tissue. They moved with precise geometry, too perfect to be random, too purposeful to be dismissed as biology alone. A low vibration rolled through the chamber. The submarine tilted slightly as currents shifted. The shadow that had been circling below ascended, becoming visible at the edge of the glow. It moved with slow, deliberate grace, a shape massive enough to distort the space around it. Not a predator, not a guardian. Something like an appendage, an extension of the organism, perhaps a sensory limb or a mobile organ, evolved to monitor its surroundings. It shimmered faintly with the same internal light as the chamber, its movements perfectly synchronized with the pulsing rhythms of the core. The crew watched in paralyzed silence as the shadow drifted closer, stopping mere meters beneath the submarine. The water around it trembled. Mara's heart pounded so hard, she thought the others might hear it. And yet the organism did not strike. It simply hovered there, as though examining them with senses beyond their comprehension. Then the core pulsed sharply, a single, decisive contraction that sent a wave of light through the entire chamber. The submarine jolted sideways, panels flickered, instruments died. Darkness swallowed the cabin for a full 2 seconds before backup lights flickered on, casting the interior in a dim red glow. The crew scrambled, checking systems that refused to reboot. The captain shouted for manual control, but the submarine remained suspended, turning slowly to face the core. Mara felt the presence again. Stronger, clearer. It was not hostile. It was deliberate, focused. The chamber brightened once more, illuminating vast tendrils extending from the central core. They moved like slow cosmic flames, unfolding in patterns too intricate to follow. One tendril drifted toward the submarine, not touching, not probing, simply approaching with the gentle precision of something trying not to harm what it wished to observe. The organism was studying them. Mara's breath trembled. She felt another whisper brush her mind, deeper this time, resonant enough to leave a faint pressure behind her eyes. It wasn't language, it wasn't emotion, it was recognition, a sense of the organism categorizing them the way a human might categorize a sudden, unfamiliar noise in the darkness. Not threat, not prey, something else. The tendril drifted closer until it hovered just feet from the viewing port. The glow inside its translucent surface intensified, revealing intricate networks of light branching like constellations beneath a living sky. It was beautiful, terrifying, impossible. The engineer murmured that energy levels inside the submarine were rising despite the power systems being offline. Mara stared at the glowing tendril and realized the truth. The organism was providing energy, feeding power into the cabin, stabilizing the pressure, ensuring their survival. It didn't want them dead. It wanted them here. The tendril brightened again, and the presence pressed into Mara's thoughts with unmistakable clarity. She felt it searching, scanning the shape of her awareness the way a blind giant might explore the outline of a tiny object held in its palm. She swallowed hard, dizzy from the alien contact. The whisper grew stronger, closing around her like a tide of cold light. The crew's voices faded. The hum of machinery dissolved. For a moment, all she perceived was the trembling connection, a bridge between her mind and the oldest living structure on the planet. Images formed behind her eyes, not visual memories, but impressions. Depth, cold, time stretching backward beyond human understanding. A world before ice, before continents fully formed. The organism had been here longer than the land above it, older than the tectonic plates that shaped the ocean floor. It had grown beneath the world, not trapped but evolving, integrating with geology itself. It was not an animal, not a plant, not a fungus. It was something else entirely, something singular, something planetary. Mara staggered as the vision faded. She gasped for breath, clutching the railing. The captain called her name, but she could barely hear him. She lifted her gaze to the core, and in that moment, the entire chamber dimmed, then reignited in a slow, sweeping wave that felt unmistakably like acknowledgement, as if the organism had finished its assessment, as if it had learned what it needed to know. The submarine tilted gently, positioned once more at the center of the chamber. Something was about to happen, something the chamber had been preparing them for since the moment they entered. The glow intensified until the water shone like molten gold, then shifted toward deeper shades of crimson and amber. The tendrils extended. The shadow beneath ascended. The core brightened with an energy that made the water itself shimmer. Mara felt the presence wrap around her thoughts with chilling certainty. This was not the awakening. This was the invitation. If you are still descending with them, do not turn back now. The organism is unveiling its truth, and what comes next will reshape the darkness beneath the world forever. Before we cross that threshold, let your presence anchor this journey. Subscribe, so you remain with us as the abyss opens wider. The chamber did not explode into motion. It did not roar or convulse or lash out. Instead, the entire living cathedral seemed to inhale, a slow, monumental draw of energy that caused the water to tremble and the light to contract inward, as though the organism were gathering every ancient memory of its existence into a single point. Mara felt the pressure shift around them, not crushing, but transformative, as though the environment itself were preparing to change its very nature. The submarine drifted closer to the core, not by force, but by inevitability. The tendrils surrounding the central mass reoriented themselves, forming a slow spiral, a living vortex that opened like a colossal iris. The walls dimmed to a dark molten red, the color of embers buried deep beneath ash, and the core brightened into a sphere of pulsing gold. Its surface rippled with patterns that resembled maps of ancient seas, shifting continents, and tectonic fault lines. Images suggesting a perspective far larger than any creature limited by the boundaries of the ocean. The captain whispered that they needed to retreat, but there was nowhere to retreat to. The chamber had become a single vast threshold, and they were suspended at its center like observers pressed against the edge of a revelation too large for the human mind to bear. The organism was preparing to reveal something, not a threat, not an attack, a truth. Mara felt the presence again, no longer brushing the edge of her thoughts but enveloping them entirely. Her senses blurred, and for a moment she no longer saw through her eyes but through something far older. A darkness unfurled inside her mind, not empty, not cold, but deep, like the first hours after creation, when the world was still cooling and finding its shape. She felt weight, pressure, epochs unfolding layer by layer. The organism showed her not images but sensations, the memory of its own birth beneath a world still forming. It had not arrived here. It had grown here, evolving beneath shifting crusts and oceans that rose and fell long before humanity existed, integrating with ice shelves as they formed, sinking deeper as continents drifted overhead. It was not meant to be seen, not meant to be known. Yet here they were, trespassing in the core of its existence, and instead of crushing them, it opened itself in a gesture that felt like vulnerability or trust. The tendrils dimmed, glowing only at their tips. The shadow below rose fully into view, a massive appendage shaped like a manta's silhouette, but composed of layers of glistening translucent structures. It hovered beneath the submarine, supporting it gently. The organism was holding them, presenting them to the core as though offering them the chance to witness its essence directly. The sphere brightened again, now bright enough that Mara had to shield her eyes. The captain shouted for the crew to retreat from the viewport, but the command dissolved in the flood of golden light pouring into the submarine. It did not burn, it did not blind. It washed through them like warm radiance, illuminating every corner of the cabin and casting long shadows across their faces. The presence pressed deeper. This time it did form something like communication. Not words, but meaning shaped into thought. It understood that they were fragile. It understood that they were temporary. It understood that their world was young, noisy, restless, and it knew that its movements beneath the ice could reshape that world in ways humanity was not ready to understand. The light dimmed suddenly. The sphere rippled. A tremor rolled through the chamber, not violent but decisive. The motion of a colossal being shifting its orientation. Currents swirled upward as the organism changed its internal structure, retracting some of its membranes while expanding others. It was preparing to descend back into dormancy. It had awakened only because of them, and now it would return to its long, slow sleep, carrying with it the faint echo of their presence like a distant dream. The tendrils loosened their spiral. The shadow beneath the submarine lowered them gently until they drifted free in the water. Systems flickered as though freed from an unseen dampening field. Panels rebooted, lights stabilized. The submarine floated unrestrained for the first time since entering the organism's domain. But the passage they had come through was gone. In its place, a new corridor opened, formed by retracting membranes that carved a path toward the distant darkness. The water pulled them softly, guiding them toward the exit. The organism was releasing them, not dismissing them, but escorting them out with the same deliberate care it had shown in drawing them inward. Mara felt the presence inside her mind fade slowly, like the last vibrations of a tuning fork settling into stillness. Before the connection fully dissolved, a final whisper of sensation reached her, deep and solemn. Not a command, not a threat, a farewell. The corridor narrowed as they ascended, and the glow dimmed behind them, until the chamber became nothing more than a faint spark swallowed by the abyss. Soon, the icy blue of the Antarctic shelf returned above their heads, familiar, but forever changed in Mara's mind. She watched the shimmering patterns fade into darkness, knowing she would spend the rest of her life trying to understand the ancient intelligence curled beneath that frozen world. When they finally broke free into the upper trench and the submarine regained full engine control, no one spoke. No one could. Human language felt too small, too blunt to describe what had been revealed to them. Mara pressed her hand to the glass one last time, knowing the organism was already sinking into silence, returning to its long, eternal slumber. The ice above them trembled faintly. A final shift, not of warning, but of acknowledgement, before stabilizing into the stillness of the ancient void. They had met something older than the continents, something that breathed beneath worlds, something that shifted when they passed, simply because it noticed. And now the darkness reclaimed it. As the submarine ascended toward the faint daylight filtering through the ice ceiling, Mara whispered into the quiet cabin, her voice steady, yet reverent. Some truths were never meant to be found, but now that they had seen one, its weight would follow them forever. If you felt this descent beneath the ice gripping you as tightly as it held them, let your presence echo through the depths. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Your voice may be small compared to the ancient things that sleep beneath our world, but together, our echoes can reach farther than you imagine.